be here today. My name is Matt Davis, and I give thanks that we were able to talk about how we might care for the earth, how we might restore the earth, how we might participate. And I heard just the other day that Earth Day is the largest gathering across the world for most people. It unites people of different classes, different religions, different economic backgrounds, different countries. That is amazing. And so I'm glad that we can be part of it on this day through great music, through being with friends, making new friends. This is just a great day. Doug Nunn, we give thanks for your expertise on this day and for your spirit of energy that's going to inspire us to make some things happen. And so as he's speaking, I think one thing I want to plant a seed with is there's lots of ways that we can make a difference in the world. And so how might we here in Mendocino, Fort Bragg, Point Arenas, how might we work together on different projects that unite in caring for creation and protecting the environment? This is a fundamental, essential task that we have as human beings to restore the earth. So let's hear it now for Doug Nunn. It's great for you to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Matt. Thank you very much. It's great to be here at the Mendocino Presbyterian Church. It's, as you know, a beautiful church. It's located in a beautiful area, and it's good to be part of this on Earth Day. 2 days ago, of course, was the official Earth Day, but here we have an extended celebration. And I want to thank also Marie-Claire Daniel for doing this lovely poster for Restore Our Earth. Let's hear it for Marie-Claire. Nicely well-placed Band-Aid right there, as you can see. I've got my pointer, so you can see it right there. Oh, my pointer doesn't seem to be working. But the Band-Aid is right over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, so good place to be. Anyway, it's great to have you here. I want to point out that the, see here, if I can get this going. Oh, no wonder I haven't turned it on yet. You know, there's always something. This Earth Day is part of something that goes back to 1970. And I want to point out the first Earth Day in 1970, I was a senior in high school. And I marched along with 20 million other Americans at that day. I marched 3 miles to school, to Ignacio Valley High School in Concord, California. And that long 3-mile trek exhausted me. And I thought to myself, what an exhausting thing it is to be pro-environment. And that continues to be something that is one of those things you have to work for. It's one of those things, we can all be lazy and do nothing, but it requires some work. So at the end of the day, after a full day of speeches, etc., at Ignacio Valley High School back then on the first Earth Day, I had to walk 3 miles home. And I had to do it. It couldn't be one of those things, Mom, can you come pick me up? You had to do it. It was one of those things you had to follow through. So, as I mentioned, across the nation, about 20 million people actually marched on Earth Day. And it was part of an international thing. And as Pastor Matt said, it has continued to be an international thing. And part of what drove me, what made me think I would like to do something, when I retired as a teacher in the summer of 2017, I noticed that this man, Al Gore, had something called the Climate Reality Project. And the Climate Reality Project is an ongoing thing. He started it after his Inconvenient Truth movie and book came out. And in 2007, his efforts to mobilize people for the environment, to do something about climate change, etc., won him the Nobel Peace Prize in conjunction with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That was in 2007. There's actually a member of our community, Evan Mills, from the Lawrence Labs in Berkeley, who was part of the IPCC. He's also a Nobel Peace Prize winner. So if you ever want to mention that to Evan, he's part of that too. Long story short, the Climate Reality Project educates people and tries to get them to be climate activists, to get out in the community and give presentations, etc. So in the summer of 2018, I went down to Los Angeles to do a training, and it was a week-long thing with all kinds of speakers, seminars, workshops, etc. And there were 2,000 of us trained then. I decided I wanted to continue. So I started doing presentations here locally, and around the area around Northern California. And I've enjoyed it very much. And being part of this movement has been great. So last year I became a mentor, which part of virtual trainings. And we did an international one. It was one of 10,000 people trained internationally. And so this is an ongoing thing. Right now there's a training going on, which I'm part of. After I finish here, I'll be hustling home to be part of a Zoom training on that. Give you an idea what's going on. So here we are. This is our lovely little planet. This picture was taken as part of one of the Apollo missions to the moon. When we first saw this, we had all seen pictures of Earth in our science books, etc. And some were pictures that had been taken by satellites, and they were nice. But when the astronauts came over the other side of the moon in the Apollo 8 and 9 missions, they landed in July of 1969 on Apollo 9, this blew us out. We couldn't believe how beautiful. This is called the blue marble picture. To my way of thinking, we have the most beautiful planet in the solar system. A lot of people say Saturn, it's got the rings, it's more beautiful. I say no, look at this thing. This is really hard to beat. And also, think about it. We're 93 million miles from the sun. We basically have the Goldilocks planet. It's not too hot like Venus. It's not too cold or have a weak atmosphere like Mars. It is just right for life. It is an extraordinary, beautiful thing. Whether you think of it as an achievement in creation or whether you think of it as just luck, we do have a great little planet. But we have an amazingly thin atmosphere. The atmosphere, scientists will say it goes out 300 miles, but there is only about 20, 25 miles of what you might say benevolent atmosphere. For those of you who might have seen that movie, The First Man, with Ryan Gosling starring as Neil Armstrong, this came out a couple of years ago, he takes an X-1 rocket and he gets up to the top of the atmosphere, to the point where the atmosphere is now becoming dark. So in other words, he's just about the edge of space. That's 25 miles up, or 28 miles up. On his odometer, or whatever you want to call it, heightometer, it's at 150,000 feet. And that's not the extent of the usable atmosphere, the kind of stuff we can use. When you think about it, it's really only about 10 miles thick. And we have a rather significantly bigger planet than that. But the problem is this. We are spewing 152 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into this thin shell of an atmosphere every 24 hours. We're treating our lovely little atmosphere, our life-giving atmosphere, as if it were an open sewer. Not a wise choice. And these are the different kinds of ways that we're doing it. As you can see, there's everything from coal plants, coal mining, crop burning, oil production, burning forests, sometimes on purpose, and as you know, oftentimes by mistake or bad luck. All the industrial processes, our version of industrial agriculture, land transportation, landfills, all of these things, and now thawing permafrost. These are all different ways that we're pumping in. And of course, land transportation, cars, etc. This has been going on since the Industrial Revolution began. For those of you who don't remember, James Watt invented the steam engine about the same year as the American Revolution began, 1776. And that steam engine was used to power cotton mills and a variety of other things. And suddenly, using coal was what was going on. This overwhelmed people at the same time that they were thought, boy, this is great. Look what we can do. But it also poisoned the atmosphere. There are Queen Victoria diaries from about 1838, 9 or 40 of her taking a train around, brand new train, around southern England and being mystified as to how dark it was and to how dreary the atmosphere was becoming. And then here's the reality, as you see on graphs. By the way, most of these things are all supplied by the Climate Reality Project. I make some slides myself, but most of these are from that. The largest source of global warming pollution is the burning of fossil fuels. Now, take a look there. As you can see, that graph shows you from about 1850. This is the earlier days of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, like I say, began in Britain, went to Europe, went to North America, and then spread out from there. But as you can see, it's picked up. And what we see here is what's called the hockey stick graph. It goes like this. And this has been an ongoing problem, and it continues to be. Global pollution continues to mar the atmosphere. This is another reality. What you may be noting is seemingly anecdotal evidence. In other words, it seems like it's just happening to you. This has been going on in the last generation or so. The Earth has been getting hotter and hotter and hotter. It's not something you're guessing on, it's actually a reality. There we have it. 19 of the 20 hottest years on record have occurred since the year 2001. The last 5 years, including last year, 2020, this slide is from last year, that's why it doesn't include 2020. There have been six of the last hottest years have been in the last 6 years. Amazing. And then this is the graph. When people tell me they don't believe that this has gone on, I want to show you this. I was born in 1952. I'm 68 years old. And if you look at this, these are mean temperatures, average in white, cooler than average in blue, and warmer than average in red, from 1951 to 1980. This is the years that I grew up in. I was 28 in 1980. So this was the climate I was getting used to. And for those of you who are near my age, you probably remember it as kind of a relatively benevolent climate. Let's watch it change over the decades. Once again, this is the mean, 1951 to 1980. This is 1987 to 97. As you can see, the cooler than average temperatures have gone down in number. The so-called average temps have as well. The warmer than average temps have gone way up in number. And now there's a new zone over here. These are the extremely hot temperatures. So that's leading up to the end of the last millennium. Now, the first decade of our new century, this also continues to move to the right, outside of the bell curve that we saw, the part that I grew up with. As you can see, the cooler than average zone is now minuscule, while the extremely hot zone is increasing. And the warmer than average is huge. It's the preponderant majority at this point. And then in approximately the last decade, this is what's happened. It's moved outside the original bell curve. And this is a reality. So let's take a look here. And then this part here, which is the extremely hot part, the extreme temperature events used to cover 0.1% of the land. Now they cover 22.1%. So these graphs are concerning to me. They're the kind of thing that I couldn't look at this and then continue to deny that this was a reality. This is, to me, very strong evidence. Now, for those of you who are wondering, just this week, of course, they had a big summit, a climate summit, that President Biden was showing in Washington, a virtual summit, and showing across the world. And this is where the major economies are sort of headed at this point. As you can see, the United States, by now making the commitments and pledges, should be going down by 2030 in a consistent way. The same is true of the European Union. They did not have a hiccup in the last 4 years where they had somebody who was denying it was a reality. Meanwhile, China has continued to build more coal plants. Although they are a leader also in solar and wind production, because of their expanding economy, they have continued to build more coal plants. So they will, at a certain point, they will begin to start to head down, but that will be longer. As you can see, that will start to happen in the next decade. They're talking about doing less coal-fired plants. The same is true of India. But this will take a while to happen. So it's fully expected that things will get worse before they get better. We, of course, know via California wildfires We know what we've endured the last couple of years, and it's been a terrible thing to see. And of course, being in a forested area here on the North Coast, a classic forest biome, we are in a situation where you can't help but be nervous. So California has been burning heavily, so has Australia, so has, of course, the Amazon. This is a picture of the Amazon forest, the so-called lungs of the planet. And they were doing quite well for about a decade leading up to the election of the Bolsonaro government in about 3 years ago. They were actually doing a lot better in terms of their stewardship of the Amazon forest. That has been jeopardized in the last years. So, I don't want to overwhelm you with the bad stuff, because there's a lot of good stuff, and that's what I'm here mostly to talk about. But you cannot make your case without giving the realities first, right? So let's take a look. It's just a reminder. 10 indicators of a warming world. When you meet your crabby uncle at Thanksgiving and he says there's no such thing, remember these basic things. Water vapor is increasing. Air temperature near surface, troposphere is increasing. Temperature over oceans is increasing. Sea surface temperature increasing. Sea level is rising. Ocean heat content is rising. Temperature over land is going up. And 3 things are happening in a negative way that are also indicators. Sea ice, the amount of sea ice is going down, snow cover is going down, and glaciers and ice sheets are decreasing. So, when we see the cost of carbon, when people say, well, it cost us a lot, it's going to cost us a lot to change, this is what will cost us to do nothing. It costs more to do nothing at this point than it does to do something. Political instability, floods and mudslide, wildfires, drought, etc. along here. Storm damage, ocean acidification, infrastructure loss, climate refugees. We're seeing a lot of those from Central America. Partly the reason they're leaving is because of political repression and gang problems. But another reason they're leaving Central America is because of droughts and other environmental problems. Species extinction, melting glaciers, famine, water scarcity, sea level rise. All of these are costs of carbon. These are problems. And so when you add them up, this is what they say. This is the real threat to the global economy. Doing nothing is a worse threat than doing something. And then this is the part where we talk about what's positive. Because we do have solutions in hand. We do have things that we are doing. We do have market trends. We have a lot of things going in a positive direction. Let's take a look here. We see coal energy consumption since 1970. It went up for a long time, and now it's starting to go down. Meanwhile, watch renewables. Renewable energy consumption has now passed coal as part of the U.S. economy. That's a big difference, please. And I'm giving you some anecdotes here, but these are some different areas. In Germany, which is beginning to move, has been begun for a while now to move to renewables, they had 100% renewable energy peaks twice in 2018 and more times since. I'm just showing you some things that go on at some of these times where they have reached 100% renewable energy use, which is impressive. The same in Britain, the home of the Industrial Revolution. The UK generated more than 18 times as much electricity from renewables as from coal in 2018. This has continued to boom along, and in fact on Thursday, the UK vowed to decrease the amount of pollution they're putting into the atmosphere, the amount of carbon into the atmosphere by 78% by 2030, which is quite impressive. You consider that, once again, I point back to Queen Victoria, about 180 years ago, she was aghast at how much smoke there was in the atmosphere. And then let's take a look at this. You remember that graph of all the pollution we're putting out since the Industrial Revolution? Well, look at global wind energy capacity since 1980. Look at how it's taken off since the beginning of our new century. This is in megawatts, and as you can see, it's taken off. Wind energy is booming. So that's a great possibility there. Onshore wind costs have gone way down. This is euros per megawatt hour, so this is obviously a European one, but you can see megawatts deployed. The amount of megawatts deployed versus the euros per megawatt hour, the price continues to go down. And then, this is one thing, when I go to the trainings and I see what is promised and so forth, I ask over and over again, are you sure about these statistics? I want to know. But what Gore and the groups do, this is something that absolutely amazes me. Globally, wind could supply, keyword could, worldwide electricity consumption 40 times over. We have to harness it, but if we are able to harness it, we could live on wind alone if we could store the energy. That's amazing when you think about it. Here's another factor. The greatest wind producing area on the planet is the center of the United States, from North Dakota down to Texas. That is the Saudi Arabia of wind. And I'm not just talking about Ted Cruz, because he lives in Texas. And he's vastly capable of putting out a lot of wind. But I'm pointing out that that area, they say, could power the United States if we can tap it all. So a key becomes supply moving into storage. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then this is my other backup stat. In addition to wind being able to supply 40 times what we need, this one is also true. And I have asked over and over again, is this true? I really want to know. Enough solar energy reaches Earth every hour to fill all the world's energy needs for a full year. That's true. Once again, we have to harness it, but if we can harness the sun and if we can harness the wind, we do not need to be burning coal. That's an amazing thing when you think about it. This also gives you an idea of what they were saying in 2002. The solar energy market will grow 1 gigawatt per year by 2010. The reality became by 2010, it was exceeded by 17 times. And by now, it's been exceeded by a factor of over 120. So in other words, they're putting up solar panels as fast as they can, and this becomes a potential for storage. World solar photovoltaic installations since 1980, once again, notice how the graph works. Since 2005, we have been booming in gigawatts added. So this is very impressive. The cost of crystalline silicon solar cell modules has gone way down. If you notice, back in 1976, I moved here in 1977 and wanted to have a solar house. At the time, it was very expensive, and I was sort of a ne'er-do-well financially, so it really wasn't an option initially. But look at it now. It is an option, and more people are doing it. And then, here's some great things. Once again, imagine the crabby uncle at Thanksgiving. You can't get a job doing that. Oh, yes, you can. Solar installer is forecast to be the fastest growing job category in the U.S. through basically the end of this decade. And wind turbine technician is second. Those are booming jobs. Once again here, there are nearly 5 times as many jobs in solar as there are in coal mining. And investments are now booming in those areas. Investments in renewables and energy efficiency create 3 times more jobs than investments in fossil fuel. And then, over the last 5 years, solar jobs in the U.S. have grown 5 times faster than the overall economy. So now, in terms of new energy that's going online, renewable energy made up 80% of all net electricity capacity added globally in 2019. Here's in Europe. In 2018, it was 88% of new capacity was wind or solar. In the United States, in 2019, in spite of a government that was basically against it, we added 70% of new capacity in solar and wind. And then, once again, anecdotal evidence is something you try to avoid, right? This is a one-off thing. But this is the Kentucky Coal Mining Museum in Benham, Kentucky. How do they power themselves? How do they pay their power bills? They have solar panels on the roof now because they're going along with what the market is dictating. and now they're saving themselves $8,000 to $10,000 per year in annual costs. So, once again, your wallet goes in one direction, whether you talk differently is different. We do want to make sure and take care of people who are losing their jobs. This is a given. What we see here is the vast majority of U.S. coal workers could be retained for new jobs, including the expansion of solar and wind. Gore's group estimates it would cost less than $2 billion. I'm not so sure about that last part, but it would be wise to retrain people and to do it in a way that makes them feel part of a decent economy of the future. I personally would rather work above ground than below ground, but I respect people who have spent their life working down there. We've got to find a way to retrain people. So here is also something that's important to remember, that once again, the direction. In 2014, electricity from solar and wind was cheaper than new coal and gas plants in only about 1% of the world. So, you can be doubtful. But by 2019, it's the cheapest source of electricity in 2/3 of the world. Look at that jump in 5 years. And by 2024, it should be the cheapest new electricity in the entire world. So that is impressive. Those movements of the market are moving on. Now, what about batteries? Solar plus batteries is set to begin a dramatic transformation. This is how we need to store it. And we're doing better all the time on this. This is cumulative storage capacity. As you can see, we're picking up the pace now. And this is projected to double again 2019 and then all the way up in 2040. We're getting better at storing. We're also, batteries are getting cheaper. Lithium-ion batteries are getting cheaper. LED lights are getting cheaper and more in use. We're working on ways that, and the market is adapting in ways that'll make this cheaper. Now I want to show you this. I'm going to read from a little bit of my notes to give you some idea. We spend $2 trillion per year on car ownership, but we only use cars about 4% of the time. Cars are extremely efficient, about 3,000 pounds. I'm a 210-pound person. To move me around 4% of the time is really inefficient when you think about it. So that is an ongoing thing. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong direction. I just want to point out, though, too, the number of electric cars, sorry, okay, for this, the number of electric cars on the road is vastly increasing, too. We haven't seen that. I still have a gas-powered car. I have an internal combustion engine. I have a Subaru. It gets 32 miles per gallon. My stepdaughter has an electric car now. The next car my wife wants to buy is an electric car. So I think we're moving in this direction. The government is subsidizing all that. This is also a powertrain cost comparison. What will go on as we see. This is important up here. Mainstream battery electric cars are projected to achieve cost parity with efficient fossil fuel cars by 2024. So once again, the movement is in that direction. Auto manufacturers are moving to electric cars. GM is committed to that. Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen is committed. Lots of the big car companies are. And countries are planning fossil fuel bailouts. Fossil vehicle phasing outs. Sorry about that. And as you can see, that's an ongoing thing. The United States is not committed to that yet, and I can't imagine that it would for a while. But as the market moves, people will move. This is another one. This is a one-off stat, but to give you an idea. Half of the world's buses will be electric by 2025. Once again, it moves in that direction. This is fascinating for those of you, how are they going to change the trucking industry in the United States? Tesla is now building a semi with a 300 to 500 mile range using just 2 kilowatt hours of electricity per mile. I bet you'll be a lot quieter too, so there's a big thing there. They also have smart highways now. You think about it, black asphalt all over the place. Why not put sensors in there which could absorb energy? Right now they're talking about doing smart highways that absorb energy during the day, and at night, instead of having to paint the different lines on the road, they would glow in the night over time. So you can actually make smart highways and build them. When they talk about redoing infrastructure, this is the kind of thing they can do. So this is a possibility for the future. They're already got a test track in Holland. They're doing the same in both China and Japan. So, is there any precedent for this rapid increase in technology? How can we do this all at once, says that crabby uncle on Thanksgiving? Well, in 1980, AT&T commissioned a study to forecast cell phone use by the year 2000. They projected 900,000 users. The actual figure was 109 million. How many now? 9.5 billion cell phones are out there. Why would a country in the middle of, say, Central Africa build phone landlines when their people can have cell phones? This is called a leapfrog technology. You jump over what's unnecessary. And as you can see, this is the kind of stuff that happens. It's called pay-as-you-go solar power. Low initial costs make small solar systems affordable in developing countries. Now, Evan Mills, who I quoted earlier, who some of you were friends with, he has done a lot of this work where they help families in places like sub-Saharan Africa and India put in solar panels. They then power LED lights, which allow the kids to study. And they also use cheaper computers. Suddenly, kids have the option of going to school longer. What does that mean on a practical level? Girls who may have married at 13 or 14 are now able to stay in school longer, and that also decreases the amount of children they're having and allows them a longer life in the workforce, or perhaps more aspirations. We also have this one. This is Bangladesh. And look at this. These are solar-powered laptops in Sierra Leone, Africa. So all of this is much cheaper than going it the other way, and it also gives people more options. This is also a possibility. We talk about green infrastructure. This is obviously a beautiful little potential plan, somebody off of some architect's desk, but at the same time, I don't have this so you can read it, but when they talk about, this is a little bit far away, but when they talk about green infrastructure, this is the kind of stuff they're talking about. When the Biden administration has come out with, we'll put up charging stations at so many miles. We'll put those up. We'll put up these other things. We'll refurbish buildings so they have better insulation. If you start to add these up, you have jobs for people to put all this stuff up. You have new infrastructure which saves energy, and you have the potential pointing in the direction of having a society that lives on less energy. So all of these, I would gladly share this slide from you. I actually found this online, so this is not owned by Al Gore. This is something with Kathleen there. This is something I could share. But there's a variety of stuff, green infrastructure at work. And then other things that are being considered. I mentioned earlier about all the wind in the Midwest and the prairie states, and all the solars in the Southwest and the Southeast. Well, if we redesign the whole power grid that we have, which is also part of infrastructure, we suddenly are looking at the possibility of moving energy around in a different way. And part of that could be something that would be a national supergrid. I'm not an engineer. I don't know exactly how this would work. But I do know that smarter people than me are considering this as a way to move for the future. So this is also the kind of stuff that's going on and being talked about now. This is politics in action. This is the kind of stuff you can write a congressman about. We can see here. Now think about this one. 13% of South Dakotans do not have access to acceptable broadband speeds. That's true for our county. I don't know the exact percentage. But you think about it. For years in Albion, I have begged, can we please have better sources? I now have a satellite, which I get internet, better speeds than I used to get, but not as good as I would like. This is true for so much of rural America. If you had better broadband access, which would be part of rebuilding infrastructure across rural areas in the United States, people wouldn't have to move. They like living in rural areas. They can stay in rural areas. There's also here all these different costs of say, hurricanes in Florida, all of these bridges and highways that need to be rebuilt, and what can be done? this big new infrastructure plan is a possibility of getting somewhere with this. There are people in the way. I don't want to do a partisan slideshow, but at the same time, this was what was said before the election. If I'm still majority leader of the Senate after next year, none of these things are going to pass the Senate. They won't even be voted on. So think of me as the Grim Reaper. Well, I don't know if he's thinking about the future, but an obligation I would feel is to pass on something to children and grandchildren that was worth having. It's not all about me and my bank account. So this is something to consider. There's also the idea of a more plant-rich diet. A lot of you know this already, and I just want to point out a few things. I'm getting near the end, by the way, just so you know. There's always Michael Pollan's admonition, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I sometimes cross the barrier on eat too much, I gotta admit. But when you think about raising livestock, it accounts for 15% of all global greenhouse gases emitted each year. They say that if cattle were a nation, they would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So if we eat less meat, we do a better job generally. So that's something to consider as a more plant-rich diet. There's a study from Oxford University that has the amount of adopting a vegan diet would result in greenhouse gas as usual emissions cut by nearly 70%. Vegetarian diets, which will result in about a 63% reduction. I personally have not been able to completely escape meat, but I must say I am eating a lot less. So there are ways that we can do this. I highly recommend this movie. How many of you have seen Kiss the Ground? Have any of you seen this movie? I highly recommend it. It's a 90-minute documentary narrated by Woody Harrelson, where they talk about new permaculture ideas, etc., that are being considered. It's a great little movie, and it gives you a quick introduction to what's going on in alternative agriculture in the last years. And this is some permaculture pictures here. Industrial agriculture has gotten us, it's obviously made a difference and made a lot of people less hungry over the last multiple generations. Having said that, it also is very dirty, and it's making a difference in a lot of other ways that we can adapt and change away from. The many uses of hemp. Now, I point this out because cotton apparently is a very dirty crop. Cotton is planted on about 2% of agricultural land, but it needs 17% of the insecticides that are used on cotton. Meanwhile, hemp could do things like my blue jeans don't need to be cotton. Jackets, canvas shoes, etc., they don't need to be cotton. Hemp could replace them, industrial hemp. There's also talk of biochar. Now these are ancient practices of various indigenous groups in the Amazon, for example. Biochar, they buried the organic waste, and then years later it was usable as fertilizer. So these are all different ideas that are being talked about. Recycling. California's always been pretty good about recycling. Right now, San Francisco, the city of San Francisco, recycles 65% of everything. And that's one of the leaders in the United States. There's greater use of recycling in other parts of the world. Europe uses about 70% of all its paper over again. South Korea, 90%. So these are things we can do a better job on, and obviously plastics. On the handout that Kathleen made, you'll see a variety of things we can do to change with plastic recycling. So I'm getting right now near the end. I want to point out, we've gone through some revolutions. About 10,000 years ago, we began the agricultural revolution. And we have increased that with industrial agriculture in the last century and a half or so. Then was the Industrial Revolution. The end of the 18th, the early 19th, and through the 19th century, we were industrializing. Power-driven machines were dramatically increasing productivity. And then the Digital Revolution, which of course I think of maybe since about 1980 or so, spread of new information and communications technologies leading to outsourced production and widespread data consumption. And now, what we need is a sustainability revolution. Reorganization of the economy around new forms of zero emission, healthy, equitable, and sustainable growth. Those are directions we're heading. Those are directions we can help move towards if we start moving as a group. And those are what politicians need to be influenced about. So, with that in mind, let's close on this thought. Evan Mills gave me this slide, which I really like. When the winds of change blow, some build walls, others build windmills. Let's be practical. We can be the builders of windmills. And although it might be, if Pastor Matt put one on his land that was right next to mine, I might grouse that it was making too much noise or something. But then again, I have to see the forest for the trees and realize that Pastor Matt's windmill is making a difference. So with that in mind, we can't live as only nations anymore. We have to be international. So building walls is probably not an option anymore. Let's build things together and work on this together as a planet. So with that in mind, let's make Earth Day a turning point. And I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. At this time, let's have some tunes. Morgan and Mireya, let's have you play a song, I think. Did you guys have another tune? I think we'll close with their piece. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So.